The most powerful woman in Europe was exposed live on television, unable to answer a single question. Ursula von der Leyen, the leader of 450 million Europeans, the woman who had brought Apple, Google, and Meta to their knees and threatened Elon Musk with the full force of European regulation, stood at the European Parliament podium visibly shaken as members of her own institution dismantled her. Reputation, document by document, lie by lie. She walked out not gracefully, not with dignity, leaving the evidence flashing on screens behind her, while the crowd erupted, demanding her resignation across 27 nations. This destruction, years in the making, stemmed from secret deals, deleted messages, and arrogance so profound she believed herself untouchable. To grasp the collapse in that chamber, one must see the real Ursula von der Leyen, operating in Brussels' shadows with confidence no one would expose her. She rose to the European Commission presidency in 2019 under deeply controversial circumstances. Not the candidate Parliament wanted, not the public voted for, installed instead by a backroom deal among heads of state who thought they could control her. Her confirmation passed by a razor-thin margin of 9 votes out of 751, underscoring how close Europe came to never having Ursula von der Leyen as its most powerful executive. But those 9 votes were enough, and from that razor-thin mandate, Ursula von der Leyen amassed more personal power than any European Commission president in history. She centralized decision-making within her personal cabinet, bypassing the traditional commission structure entirely, sidelining senior commissioners elected to manage key policy areas, and allowing a circle of advisors with no democratic accountability to shape policies affecting 500 million people. Career officials with decades of expertise were ignored in favor of decisions made behind closed doors, turning a rules-based, transparent institution into her personal operation, and she did it for years with near impunity. The cracks began appearing in 2021 in an incident Europeans would call Sofagate during an official visit to Turkey. Von der Leyen traveled to Ankara with European Council President Charles Michel to meet President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Protocol called for 2 chairs of equal standing, but both were taken by Erdogan and Michel, leaving von der Leyen standing in front of the world's cameras. She eventually lowered herself onto a side sofa, visibly uncomfortable and humiliated as the 2 men conducted official business. The images went viral instantly. The most powerful woman in European politics literally sidelined, while the men ran the meeting. European feminist groups erupted in outrage. MEPs demanded explanations and resignations. And Brussels' response? Charles Michel's team insisted protocol had been followed, while von der Leyen's office complained quietly but said almost nothing publicly. The humiliation was buried under procedural language and institutional non-answers, but the damage to her credibility was unmistakable. Nobody resigned. Nobody was held accountable. Ursula von der Leyen absorbed the humiliation, smiled through it, and continued accumulating power as if nothing had happened. That pattern, causing damage, avoiding accountability, and pressing forward as if consequences didn't apply to her, defined her entire presidency. Nothing illustrated it more starkly than the scandal now exploding in the European Parliament, the Pfizer text message affair. During the COVID-19 pandemic, von der Leyen personally negotiated a vaccine contract with Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla worth 1.8 billion doses and roughly 35 billion euros of European taxpayer money, the largest procurement in EU history, entirely through personal text messages, bypassing legally mandated procedures designed to ensure transparency and prevent corruption. These messages were never recorded, never archived, and never disclosed to the European Parliament, leaving no official record of a negotiation affecting 500 million citizens. When the New York Times revealed the texts in April 2021, the Commission's response was breathtakingly brazen. The messages had been deleted, permanently erased from the device used for the EU's largest public procurement deal. Parliament demanded them immediately, and the European Ombudsman launched a formal inquiry, concluding that the Commission had engaged in maladministration, a formal finding that von der Leyen had broken the rules and violated the principles of accountability at the heart of the European Union. It was the kind of finding that should have triggered immediate parliamentary proceedings, formal censure, and serious questions about whether she could continue in office. Instead, Ursula von der Leyen met every inquiry with the unshakable confidence she had displayed since 2019. She appeared before committees, delivering carefully crafted non-answers that acknowledged nothing and admitted nothing, while her legal team buried investigators in procedural objections that delayed every inquiry for months. She relied on the political reality that removing a commission president required an absolute majority in parliament, a threshold her allies could always prevent from being reached. She was untouchable, she knew it, and she acted accordingly, right up until the moment she walked into that chamber and faced someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this confrontation, with evidence she never expected anyone to obtain. When the documents were pulled from that folder and projected on screens behind her in front of the full session, the facade of European institutional competence and democratic accountability began collapsing in real time. The contents were explosive, and von der Leyen, the most powerful bureaucrat in European history, suddenly could not speak. The MEP standing against her was someone she had never taken seriously, Romanian MEP Cristian Teres, who had spent nearly 3 years filing formal complaints, submitting parliamentary questions, and demanding disclosures about the Pfizer contract. For 3 years, the Commission had stonewalled him with procedural delays, incomplete responses, and the bureaucratic silence Brussels had perfected into an art form. Most MEPs would have given up. Most politicians would have moved on to easier battles with better headlines. Cristian Teres did not. He built his case document by document, source by source, with the patience to unearth a truth buried under layers of institutional protection. That afternoon, what appeared on the screen behind Ursula von der Leyen were internal Commission communications recovered through Belgian court discovery, leaked internal documents, and cross-referenced procurement records compelled for release by repeated ombudsman rulings. Together, they told a story far worse than anyone outside Brussels had realized. The Pfizer contract had not merely been negotiated informally via personal texts. It had deliberately bypassed the Standard Procurement Committee, the body of independent experts designed to evaluate major contracts and prevent exactly this kind of political interference at von der Leyen's personal direction. Internal emails showed officials explicitly instructed not to involve oversight structures, including one senior advisor noting that the president wants this handled at the personal level, a line now projected in 72-point font to every camera in the chamber. But the pricing documents were even more devastating. The per-dose price von der Leyen had personally locked in with Albert Bourla was far higher than what individual member states had negotiated independently and significantly above what non-EU countries secured for the same product. Belgium and Denmark had paid less, and calculations using Commission data revealed that European taxpayers had overpaid between 7 and 13 billion euros because standard oversight had been bypassed by one woman negotiating on her personal phone. Von der Leyen stood at the podium, and the transformation was visible to all. This was no longer the polished, unflappable Commission president who had faced down Elon Musk and lectured American tech giants on European values and the rule of law. This was a woman who had just watched evidence she believed was permanently buried appear on a screen behind her, in front of 705 MEPs, dozens of cameras, and a live broadcast reaching millions of Europeans. She reached for her prepared notes and began delivering the standard lines about proper procedures, institutional processes, and ongoing legal matters that prevented comment on specific documents. And then something unprecedented happened. The chamber didn't let her finish. From left, right, and center, MEPs who had never agreed on anything in years of sessions were on their feet simultaneously shouting the same demand in 7 languages: resign. The session chair tried 3 times to restore order, and each time the noise grew louder. Italian MEPs on opposite ends of the spectrum stood side by side. French conservatives and progressives unified in outrage, and even members of von der Leyen's own European People's Party, her political family that had protected her through previous scandals, sat in stunned silence rather than defending her. That silence was more devastating than any shouting from her opponents. When your own allies no longer stand for you, the chamber knows the political calculation has shifted and the protection that made you untouchable has quietly vanished. Von der Leyen attempted to speak twice more, both attempts collapsing within seconds as the uproar drowned her out, while her communications director, seated in the gallery, scrolled on his phone, a signal to anyone familiar with crisis management that the moment had already slipped beyond repair. The spin operation was already being assembled in real time, emergency messaging drafted, friendly media contacts alerted, damage control infrastructure activated. But this time, the chaos was happening too fast and too publicly for any operation to contain it. While the chamber descended into uproar, the clip of the documents on the screen behind a speechless van der Leyen was already circulating among millions of Europeans who had never watched a parliamentary session but had been waiting years for exactly this moment. She gathered her papers, spoke briefly to an aide, and then Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, walked away from the podium in the middle of a live session, a violation of the very procedural rules of the institution she ran, and disappeared through a side door while the chamber erupted behind her. The walkout lasted 11 seconds, filmed from 4 angles, and by the time she reached the corridor outside, those 11 seconds had been seen by 34 million people. But what awaited her there was something even her crisis team had not anticipated, because the story did not end when she left the chamber, it was only beginning. What unfolded in the next 4 hours would make everything inside that room look like a minor opening act. This was not merely a political disagreement, it was the complete and total unraveling of the most protected bureaucrat in modern European history, live on television, with no way to walk it back and no way to make those documents disappear a second time. Van der Leyen had spent 5 years building a regulatory empire so vast she believed no parliament, court, journalist, or elected official could touch her. She was wrong. The 34 million people who watched those 11 seconds of her silent walkout are proof that the wall she built around herself has finally, completely, and permanently collapsed. The European public is not staying quiet. Protests have erupted in Brussels, Berlin, Paris, and Warsaw. Petition drives demanding her formal resignation have gathered over 2 million signatures in under 48 hours, while MEPs who once feared publicly challenging her are now stepping forward on record. The institutional shield that once made her untouchable has vanished overnight, and somewhere in a Brussels corridor, the woman who once threatened Elon Musk with the full force of European regulatory power is confronting something unprecedented in her career: real consequences. This story is far from over. The Belgian court case continues. The Ombudsman investigation has reopened with new evidence, and 3 member state governments have formally requested an independent audit of the entire Pfizer procurement process. Within the European Parliament, votes for a formal censure motion are quietly being tallied by those who now believe the numbers are sufficient. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe now, because the next video will cover the resignation demands, the censure vote countdown, and the one document her legal team is desperate to suppress before it reaches the public. Drop a comment telling me whether you think van der Leyen survives this ordeal or if her time is finally up, and hit the like button if this video revealed information the mainstream media is refusing to cover. The truth is emerging, and we'll be here for every single step of the unfolding story. It was the kind of finding that should have triggered immediate parliamentary proceedings, formal censure, and serious questions about whether she could remain in office. Instead, Ursula von der Leyen met every inquiry with the same unshakable confidence she had displayed since 2019. She appeared before committees, delivering carefully crafted non-answers that acknowledged nothing and admitted nothing, while her legal team buried investigators in procedural objections that delayed every inquiry for months. She relied on the political reality that removing a commission president required an absolute majority in parliament, a threshold her allies could always block. She was untouchable. She knew it, and she acted accordingly, right up until she walked into that chamber and faced someone who had spent years preparing for this confrontation, with evidence she never expected anyone to uncover. When the documents were pulled from the folder and projected on screens behind her in front of the full session, the facade of European institutional competence and accountability began collapsing in real time. The contents were explosive, and van der Leyen, the most powerful bureaucrat in European history, suddenly could not speak. The MEP standing against her was someone she had never taken seriously, Romanian MEP Cristian Teres, who had spent nearly 3 years filing formal complaints, submitting parliamentary questions, and demanding disclosures about the Pfizer contract. For 3 years, the Commission had stonewalled him with procedural delays, incomplete responses, and the bureaucratic silence Brussels had perfected into an art form.